Okay, you can hear me clearly and the video is clear, right?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, yes, my computer's been having some issues. Okay, let's start. Om Agyana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupah Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Manojavam Marutatulya Vegam Jitendriyam Buddhimatam Varishtham Vatatmajam Vanarayutha Mukhyam Shri Ramadutam Shirasa Namami Kujantam Rama Rameti Madhuram Madhuraksharam Aruhya Kavita Shakham Vande Valmiki Kokilam Apadam Apahartaram Dataram Sarvasampadam Lokabhiramam Shri Ramam Bhuyo Bhuyo Namamyaham Dakshine Lakshmano Yasya Vame tu Janakatmajah Purato Marutir Yasya Tam Vande Raghunandanam. So before we begin, I want to say something. I am very grateful that despite a break for almost 2 months, and then we started, and then we had something that's not regular, and still many of you joined. I take that as a great blessing for myself. But I want to apologize to all of you. When we went to India, because we were traveling non-stop, of the 10 weeks that we were in India, 6 weeks we were traveling. And so I could not be confident of a internet connection that will allow for video. And something or the other was happening on Saturdays for us. It will be Saturday night travel or something that just did not allow for me to have this Ramayana series. I thought I would be in India, I'd be relaxed. I could do Rama Raksha Stotra also, same internet connections. I didn't have enough data, whatever. It just didn't happen. And I'm very sorry that I couldn't keep up what I had thought I could. And then after the travel, I fell sick. I got shingles. So my body was in severe rash. I was pretty much bedridden for the last 2 weeks before I left India. And then when I got back as well, I just haven't been in the right physical condition to study and do justice to our gathering. So I didn't want to do something just half-hearted or even something less. I am definitely way better than where I was. And you may possibly have another interruption, maybe or may not be. I'll try my best to not to, because we are now moving out of Chicago. And so I'll be busy with packing and actually physically moving out. So it'll take another week. Next weekend is when we are moving. I will try my best to have another Ramayana session before that, whichever way. Shamakund and I had some discussion. So we'll make that happen for you. And after that, I can tell you with fair confidence that I'll be regular every Saturday. So please bear with me. My apologies to you. And still you've joined, which I'm extremely grateful for engaging me in this wonderful service of discussing Srimad Ramayana. We are in the Kishkindha Kanda. We left off around chapter 30, 36, I think. Yeah. So we're going to look at the last few verses of chapter 36. So let's just get a little background or summary of where we left off. Lakshmana went to Kishkinda angrily to shake up Sugriva that he has delayed in fulfilling his promise to Sri Ramachandra. And Lakshmana cannot tolerate, on the one hand, Sugriva not doing what he said he would do, and on the other hand, Sri Ramachandra in severe pangs of separation from Sita Devi and anxiety that he may or may not ever see Sita Devi again. So Lakshmana goes to convey that message. Then Tara intervenes and speaks to Lakshmana. Lakshmana cools down. Sugriva then follows in and seeks forgiveness of Lakshmana. But Lakshmana, because he's by nature very gentle soul, Valmiki Muni refers to him as Saumya, one who's very gentle. Then Lakshmana and Sugriva have this conversation, and this is where we left off, and we'll pick it up right there. So the last few verses of chapter 36 is where Sugriva seeks forgiveness from Lakshmana for the lapse in doing what was required. Not that he had forgotten, it's just that he had lost track of time. It happens. So then Lakshmana, as soon as Sugriva seeks forgiveness, Lakshmana speaks very sweet words. And he says, no, Sugriva, you're actually a very dear friend of Sri Rama. And you are full of strength and valor. In fact, you are a person who knows what is virtue. You're a very grateful person. You're one who never retreats from any battle. And you always keep your word. So whatever you have spoken to me now, Sugriva, I fully accept. But let's do one thing. Let's go quickly back to where Sri Ramachandra is on Mount Prasavana and instill confidence in him. In your friend, he refers to Rama as your friend. Let's go instill some confidence in your friend who is sitting there broken-hearted, wondering if you are still his friend. Not because Ramachandra has a doubt, but the idea that friend means they carry out what they promised. Then Lakshmana, because these are all great personalities with ocean-like deep character, this is what Lakshmana now says to Sugriva. He says, Yat cha shoka abhibhutasya shrutva ramasya bhashitam mayatvam parushani uktaha tat kshamasva sakhe mama. Sakhe, oh my dear friend. Yat cha shoka abhibhutasya ramasya. When Sri Ramachandra was completely in sadness, bhashitam, he spoke, shrutva, I heard that. So whatever Ramachandra was feeling, I heard that. And I could not bear it. Maya tvat parushani uktaha. I spoke very harshly to you. Tat kshamasva mame. Tat kshamasva mama. Please forgive me. Sakhe, oh my dear friend. Very beautiful. Lakshmana, such a great personality, seeking forgiveness from Sugriva. Because although socially, culturally, spiritually, in any dimension, Sri Lakshmana is up there in the sky. And Sugriva, although very great king, is in one sense pedestrian. However, Lakshmana did not hesitate even once to seek forgiveness and said, I'm sorry, when I saw Sri Ramachandra's agony, I spoke out rudely to you. Please forgive me. And the words are very specific. tat kshamasva sakhe mama. Please forgive me. So with that, chapter 37 begins, where Sugriva turns to Hanumanji, who's standing there, and gives him an order. Bring all the Vanaras from anywhere they are on planet Earth. Okay? Most of the Vanaras live on the top of these 5 massive mountains: Mount Mahindra, Himalaya, Vindhya, Kailasha, and Mount Mandara. Plus, there are so many who are living along certain areas. Now, from Sugriva's point, he calls them Udayadri. Udaya means where the sun rises. That means when you look east, there are some ranges of mountains in the east from where the sun rises. And then he says, you go far west, which is called the Astadri. Asta means sun setting. So on the western side, how far that you can see, there is a mountain range beyond which the sun sets. That means the entire span of the earth globe. You please go and bring these monkeys. Get the word out. And that's called Mount Padman. I don't know where it is geographically. And then he says, these monkeys are the ones that are black in color, like black mascara. They are black, cloudish-like. They have strength that match mighty elephants. They live in Mount Anjana. They are also supposed to be invited. Then he says, go and call those very golden complexioned monkeys that are living on Mount Meru, etc. And gives a whole long list from where Hanuman should go and gather all these monkeys from. And he says, Hanuman, quickly give this order and send your assistants. And whatever it takes, some cases they may have to give them an order. In some cases, they may have to coerce or cajole them to come here. And in some cases, they may have to give them concessions or some incentives. Whatever it takes, Hanuman, you as the minister that I trust, make this happen. And then, because he's the king, he gives his decree. Any of those Vanaras, if they do not arrive here within the next 10 days, then those persons I will personally kill. Okay, so get all these fantastic lion-like monkeys to come here in hundreds and thousands and whatever numbers they can. So Hanuman immediately turned and ordered his assistants to go and spread all over the earth and invite all these groups of monkeys to come back to Kishkindha. So here are some numbers. Actually, there's a whole numbering system in Ramayana, which we'll discuss some other time, close to Yuddhakanda. But for now, I'll give you some idea of how many monkeys came. This is just in the chapter. This is a rough estimate because there are a lot more than the numbers here, but you'll see. 30 million black mascara-like monkeys from Anjanadri. 100 million golden colored monkeys from Astadri, the western hills. 10 billion monkeys from Mount Kailash. And these monkeys have colors like that of the mane of a lion. Then I think I can count this number. 10 trillion monkeys from the Himalayas who pretty much survive on fruits and tubers. And 10 billion crimson red looking monkeys from Mount Vindhya. Then there are innumerable. Valmiki Rishi uses the number uncountable, which means a lot more than 10 trillion. Monkeys that came from Milk Ocean, a place called the Tamala Woodlands, and a land of the coconuts. So I took some time to add them up, and this is what I got. That can be numbered. So this number is more than the monkeys that are there, a lot more than this number. 10 trillion, 20 billion, 130 million, and more monkeys were ordered to come within 10 days. Now, from Kishkindha, upon Sugriva's and Hanuman's order, there were these assistant monkeys that jumped quickly from Kishkindha and went to the Himalayas. In the Himalayas, they visited a very sacred place. And that sacred place was a place where a very famous yajna for Lord Shiva was conducted previously. And because of that yajna, that place is so special, it seems, that it is full of fruits, roots, and tubers. And that if anyone eats those fruits or tubers, even a little bit, then they will not feel hungry for one whole month. So these monkeys, because they visited such a wonderful place, they brought souvenirs back for Sugriva. They bought fruits from there, the tubers, and they went and found special flowers for Sugriva and quickly arrived back. So Valmiki gives an idea of how quickly they went and came back. That by the time these monkeys jumped to the Himalayas and came back, Lakshmana and Sugriva were still together. They were supposed to go quickly to meet Sri Ramachandra. Do you have this background noise? Can you hear the grass lawnmower, guys? 1 second. Okay, sorry, I could hear that lawnmower loud, so I was distracted. These monkeys went to the Himalayas, quickly ordered the other monkeys to come, and came back with all of these gifts even before Sugriva and Lakshmana walked towards where they need to be to go meet Ramachandra. That means not that they had gone to Ramachandra, they were still in Sugriva's palace, trying to go to Sugriva's palanquin. So it's most like going from the home to the car garage. That quickly these monkeys went and came back. So as soon as they came back and got all these gifts for Sugriva, Sugriva received the gifts very happily, and he was very gladdened by the news that these monkeys will come back, that whoever they had informed to come within 10 days. Then Lakshmana requests Sugriva, could we please depart from Kishkindha? Because for Lakshmana, he's concerned that Ramachandra is still waiting there. And Sugriva says, so be it, let's go towards Mount Prasavana. And then here's an interesting thing. Sugriva looks at one of the palace guards and says, hey, come here. Go and order for my palanquin to be ready. I need to go to Mount Prasavana. So hastily, the attendants ran here and there, got the palanquin, very nicely decorated, royal, opulent palanquin, and kept it on the ground for Sugriva to enter. Sugriva got in, invited Lakshmana to also sit in, and so many carriers picked the palanquin. Some attendants held a big royal white umbrella over the palanquin to signal to everyone that the king, Sugriva, is on his path, is moving. As royally that Sugriva travels and orders for his palanquin, as soon as he reaches Mount Prasavana, Sugriva gets off the palanquin with both his hands or arms folded like this, hands folded, reaches Sri Ramachandra and falls flat on the ground with his crown touching Sri Ramachandra's lotus feet. Sri Ramachandra very lovingly picks up Sugriva and embraces him very, very tightly. And Sri Ramachandra tells him, you are a very, very well disciplined king. Because a king should know how to organize himself and his time in a way that he can fulfill dharma, artha, and kama properly. So Ramachandra tells him, dharmam, artham cha kamam cha kale yahatu nishevate. Nishevate means one who organizes himself. Vibhajya satatam veera sa raja harisattamaha. Harisattama means the best of the monkeys. Oh, best of the monkeys, Sugriva. Sa Raja, only such a person can be a king. Yaha, one who, dharmam artham cha kamam cha kale yaha vibhajya. One who divides his time very, very carefully for dharma, artha, and kama. That means all three need to be accomplished for him. He says, however, a king who does not do so and spends all his time only for kama in worldly pleasures actually falls very badly. And he says, hitva dharmam tatha artham cha. Hitva means giving up. Giving up dharma and artha, kamam yahatu nishevate. One who only dedicates himself or devotes himself to kamam. And then Ramchandra gives an analogy. Sa vriksha agra yatha suptaha patitaha pratibudhyate. It's like somebody who's sleeping on a branch of a tree. And that when that branch breaks, this guy only wakes up when he falls to the ground. The idea being that one is in a one puts oneself in a very risky position if one only devotes oneself, especially a king here, who devotes himself or a queen herself to just worldly sensual pleasures. That is as dangerous as sleeping on a branch. When one falls, one only wakes up when they hit the ground, meaning it's too late. One doesn't have the chance to repair themselves. And they only get a realization of how bad they have done after they get hurt. So it's too late by that time. So in one sense, this is similar to the Bhagavad Gita verse, Yuktahara viharasya, Yukta cheshtasya karmasu, Yukta swapnavabodhasya, yogo bhavati dukkha. Dukkha means one who is relieved of misery. And such a yogi, yogo bhavati, this yogi becomes released of any material distress if they are ahara vihara cheshtasya karmasu. If they are somehow or the other very regulated in their eating, in their entertainment, vihara. Prabhupada uses that word vihara to mean recreation. Karmasu, cheshtasya karmasu, in one's occupational work or whatever the one has to do, and regulated in swapna, in sleeping or dreaming, as it says. Swapna avabodhasya, yogo bhavati, dukkha. So Ramachandra has a similar message, just the words are different, that one who is regulated, such a person is actually fit for being a king or being enjoying things. So then Sugriva is very grateful to Sri Ramachandra, and he informs him that billions and trillions of monkeys are arriving as they speak, and they are ready for finding Sita and, if required, fighting a battle with Ravana. Hearing this, Sri Ramachandra becomes very jubilant. And chapter 38 ends with this beautiful verse. Tatah samudyogam avekshah viryavan hari pravirasya nideshah vartinah babhuva harshat vasudhadipatmajah prabuddha nilotpala tulya darshanah. So the last part of the verse says, actually the full verse, but the words are very beautiful. Babhuva harshat, babhuva means became. Ramachandra became harshat, out of great happiness and jubilance. Vasudha Adhipa Atmaja. Vasudha Adhipa Atmaja. Ramachandra is a prince. So a prince is called the son of a king. Vasudha Adhipa. Vasudha means the earth. Adhipa means the ruler. Atmaja. Atmaja. Vasudha Adhipa Atmaja. Prabuddha Nilotpala Tulya. Prabuddha, he became so delightful knowing this that his eyes became big like the petals of a fully opened lotus or lily. Nila Utpala Tulya. Nilotpala Tulya Darshana. But Ramachandra became very hopeful, became very happy, knowing that finally so many monkeys are coming to search for Sita Devi. So there are some important considerations and lessons which I'll quickly get through. One is friendships, as Sugriva said, are in one sense easy to make, but a lot more difficult to maintain. And friendships are such where friends cannot take each other for granted. It is a relationship where one needs to constantly contribute and invest in. Now, generally people think friendship means only giving. That's not true. According to Rupa Goswami, love and affection grows when there is giving and taking. If there's only giving and no taking, it's very one-sided and it's not friendship. The feature of priti, affection, does not manifest because it is one-sided. Actually, even with Lord Shri Krishna, it's never one-sided. Sometimes we think, oh, only Krishna is giving me mercy. We use the phrase causeless mercy. It is not necessarily true in that sense. Causeless because there's no material reason, but actually the relationship is very reciprocal. The devotee carries bhakti, by which he or she offers different things and oneself to whatever degree possible to the Lord. And he's so moved by it that he, who is the embodiment of karuna or mercy, then offers himself to the devotee. So it's always reciprocal. So also in friendship. So that's one. Second, there is always room for mistakes or errors in friendships, and generally friends, by definition, might be or should be. I'm trying to avoid the word should as much as I can, because one, I'm not some expert at this. But the founding principles of a friendship is that there is room for errors and mistakes. And when a person genuinely apologizes, then it should be revived. Like in the case of Sri Ramachandra and Sugriva. Now Lakshmana, who spoke harshly. Although, honestly, the harshness was out of his affection for Sri Ramachandra. But for Sugriva, Lakshmana did not hesitate for a moment to seek his forgiveness. Lakshmana is very big, Sugriva is very small. Yet, it's the character that for a big person to say, please forgive me, is actually greatness of their character. And Sugriva did not, Lakshmana did not hesitate. Then another is the number of monkeys that are there on the planet, and all of them were summoned by the king. So this idea of loyalty, of course, Sugriva also gave the decree, if you don't come in 10 days, I will kill you. Is the order is, this is not a order to be taken lightly. And the numbers that we hear are just staggering. At some other time, I will share the numbering system that's there in Ramayana, which is far beyond what we as humans are used to and ever use in our day-to-day lives. Then an interesting feature is Sugriva, who is a very, very humble devotee of Sri Ramachandra. But sometimes we have a very one-dimensional view of humility. That means the person is always, impoverished, wearing torn clothes, thinking of oneself really very, very lowly. That's not the dimension of, or that's not the style of humility we hear in Srimad Bhagavatam or Ramayana. And the contrasting is given by Valmiki Rishi. And before I say this, I've said this previously also, but I'll say it, that in scripture or in literature, but in scripture particularly, there is always this concept of dhvani. Dhvani means sound. Actually, it means hint or indication. The reason being, suppose someone rings a bell or blows a conch. You may not see the person, but you can hear that sound. So in scripture, especially Ramayana, Bhagavatam, or any of the scriptures, it's full of dhvani, which means the author is not going to spell everything out. We as readers need to pick up on the dhvani. And one of the things is here, Sugriva turns around and orders, get my palanquin. And he has hundreds of attendants really fussing around him. And he sits in the palanquin very royally with an umbrella. I forgot to mention that when Sugriva and Lakshmana are traveling in the palanquin, they're not going quietly. There are hundreds of musicians banging drums, playing instruments, and singing Sugriva's glories. As soon as he reaches Mount Prasavana, he gets down and falls at Sri Ramachandra's lotus feet. So it may be that he's a king, but in front of the Supreme Lord, in front of one spiritual master, doesn't matter how big, powerful one may be, one's place is at the feet of these great persons. Now, Sugriva carries that in his heart, even when he's sitting in the palanquin, even when he has attendants and they are singing his glories. He does not forget that. This royal luxury does not get to his head. Otherwise, Sugriva would be a very hypocritical person. And Ramachandra will not allow Sugriva anywhere close to him if he has even the slightest pride or arrogance. Because Ramachandra's, one of his names is Garvamana Sadura. Ramachandra keeps himself far away from anyone who has any semblance of pride. Now we may think, oh, I have so much pride. Does it mean I have no access to Sri Ramachandra? The answer is, it depends. If one is aware and one is consciously working on overcoming that prideful tendency, then it is very attractive to Sri Ramachandra. On the other hand, one who is probably in denial or is unaware or does not recognize, then it's hard to access. Then we rely on the merciful lotus feet of the devotees of the devotees of the devotees of Sri Ramachandra. And from there, hopefully someone will tell us, hey, that's this quality is not good for you, or is not helpful, or is a stumbling block. So our awareness is indicated either from within or from outside. So some very beautiful lessons that despite all of this, when Sugriva came, Ramachandra did not argue with him. He embraced him very, very tightly and actually told him that a good king is one who has great regulation. Now, although Ramachandra is talking to Sugriva and he's referring to him as a king and speaking a principle of a king, that principle is applicable to anybody and everybody, especially practicing devotees like ourselves. That yukta ahara viharasya yukta cheshtasya karmasu, of filling our life with a good mix of activities that are in proper regulation. Too much of any one thing is hurtful. Proper amount of rest, proper amount of recreation, proper food, proper working properly or enough, and not cutting corners, are all important aspects. Of course, very, very interesting is in the purport of chapter 6, verse 17 of Bhagavad Gita, where this verse appears, Prabhupada gives the example of Haridas Thakur and Rupa Goswami, that they never ate or never slept. So, although Krishna is referring to a yogi who has everything properly regulated and distributed in one's life, Prabhupada gives the very far other end of the spectrum examples of Rupa Goswami and Haridas Thakur. The idea being that when one is so filled with bhakti, that this verse, which is for a practicing yogi, may not apply. So we may not be able to sit here and evaluate Rupa Goswami and say, Yukta Ahara Siva, hold on a second. Rupa Goswami actually did not even eat much, ate something once in a couple of days. So he is not properly regulated. So have all his miseries really gone away? I mean, it's a far-reaching example. But for a practicing devotee, this is very, very important. To sleep on time, wake up on time, try to make one's life as regulated as possible. Of course, I'm expecting people asking me regulating time management questions. I hope not. Each one of us is the best judge of how to best use our time. We're not children, but it's an important principle. And finally, just the joy of Sri Ramachandra, hearing this verse, that's why I repeated the last two lines. If you can visualize Ramachandra's already very big eyes opening up like black lotus petals or black lily petals, hearing that Sugriva has arrived. Now, there are many reasons for Prabuddha Nilotpalatulya Darshanaha, that Ramachandra's eyes widened like a fully blossomed lotus petal. One reason could be that Sugriva has come back from his forgetfulness. And yes, so that's one. To see that his friend has come back to engage in his side of the friendship promise is very, very pleasing to the Lord. So for any living entity who has forgotten his or her ways, when they reinstate themselves in service to the Supreme Lord, his eyes become widened like a fully blossomed lotus petal. Then the news that millions and trillions of monkeys are arriving gladdens Ramachandra, that finally he can meet his consort. So the sense of separation has now heightened to the prospect of meeting Sita Devi. In Rupa Goswami's teachings, this is called pravasa, in separation. Pravasa means two lovers, especially Krishna and Radharani, or the Lord and his consort, more generally speaking, who have been previously together, but now have been separated for a very long time. And pravasa is that sense of separation where there is a great anticipation of meeting, perhaps soon. So with that, I'll end here or pause and see if there are any questions, comments, thoughts.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I liked the way you were explaining about Lord Ramachandra. Like first and foremost, Lakshmana asking forgiveness to Sugriva, and Lord Ramachandra embraced him, took him up, etc. Very glad at it. And just a few verses or a sarga before, Lord Ramachandra had given him a threat that the path by which Vali went is wide open for you. And I recollect having similar conversation with you when you were here, that sometimes it becomes very challenging to ask for forgiveness when we know we are right. And you mentioned, you did tell that to say sorry is not always about telling that I am wrong, I'm sorry, but it also about, I'm sorry that you are sad, you have been distressed, you have been feeling bad about it. That's one thing that's happening here. But the apology which Lakshmana is asking is not for that. And Lord Ramachandra, being the Supreme Lord, on just a few verses ago, or like a little while ago, he was threatening Sugriva, and now he's embracing him. In our own life, how do we take it up here? That when we really like in our life, it's mostly, many times we feel I am right, somebody else is actually wrong, and they may have some feelings saying, oh, because you did that time ago, I felt bad, but we may not identify with any of those feelings. We may be in our own space of saying I'm right, I'm wrong, maybe it's your mind tricking you, etc. It's one way to say empathetically, like being empathetic to them, at least lip-wise, to be empathetic to them, saying, I'm sorry to hear you. Is there anything else that can be done so that it becomes more genuine here? And especially becoming genuinely humble and genuinely asking, saying sorry when required, whatever circumstances required.
I'm speaking generally that the principle is it takes two to tango. Or as they say in Hindi, tali ek hath se nahi bajti hai. It may genuinely be the case that, let's say, I'm right. I don't feel that I've made any mistake. It may be the case. As a devotee, it behooves me to consider and sort of go through the series of conversations or behaviors and ask myself, could I have done this differently or better? Could I have spoken differently or better? Could I have behaved or indicated whatever differently or better? And it is quite possible, I might even say 100% possible, that we can always do better. And as soon as we recognize that we can always do better, we can always say better, we can think better, Because we may say, well, I don't think I could behave any better. I couldn't behave any differently. I don't think I could have said it any differently. Perhaps we could have thought it differently, thought about the person, about the situation better. And if that recognition is there, that yes, I could have been humbler, I could have been sweeter, I could have been gentler, I could have been whatever, softer, I could have used better phrases. There may have been some harshness in my speech. It's possible, right? I mean, I don't think I've crossed that by any means. Then for that, there is apology. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I could have done it better. Now that I cannot tell anyone else that you should be like this. This is for myself. Each one of us is responsible for our own bhakti. Unless we're playing the role of a spiritual master, this is a different thing. And none of us is on this forum. But it's up to us. Bhakti is a path of a lot of introspection and looking at how we have spoken, behaved during the day, during whatever course of time. And Lakshmana, at that moment, when he walked in, thumping the ground, was in full Anantasesha mode and was going to burn Kishkinda down just by his glance, said to Sugriva, I'm sorry for speaking harshly to you. And also he said why he spoke so, but he said, I'm sorry I spoke harshly, because Lakshmana, being the great person, may have considered that I could have said it differently. Now, this is not an error in Lakshmana's sake at all. There was no error. He came angrily, there's no error in it. Yet, a man of great character says, oh, I added fuel to the fury. I'm sorry. Please forgive me that I spoke harshly to you. I mean, fantastic character. That's what I'd say, Shamakun.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances, Agrish Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhu. I was just appreciating the way you connected this verse, Yuktahara Viharasya, to the kings. And I never considered this verse. I was just considering this verse as a practicing sadhaka. But you connected this verse to the kings, that kings should also live in this way, which I never ever thought of that. Because in the bhakti institution, in the bhakti process, there is a sadhana bhakti, which includes following the regulative principles, and then Ragunaga Bhakti, which is Sadhya Bhakti. Ragunaga Bhakti. So in sadhana, in regulative principles, we have to follow this to get to the level where we come to the Raganuga Bhakti. But I have never, ever, ever thought of that to be a person of a good character, or to be a good king, or a good administrator, or a good manager, you have to be like this. I never thought of that.
These are words of Sri Ramachandra. Those words are Sri Krishna. These are words of Sri Ramachandra. Similar lessons, just context and words may be different. I also intentionally did not dwell on actually living one's life with dharma, artha, and kama, because then I think we get a little wound up on, hey, Bhagavatam says dharma projita kaitavottara. And there is so much spoken against dharma, artha, and kama. So I didn't want to confuse the conversation. But on a day-to-day basis, I'll leave you with this, that as much as we are trying to practice pure bhakti, we also realize that within us are elements of dharma, artha, and kama. Now, kama does not necessarily relate to very base, crass, gross sort of desires. But kama could mean we all have material aspirations. Either we want some home, we want a safe place, we want something, some accomplishment. They're all aspirations that may not be necessarily purely Krishna conscious. The reason being, we are still, I shouldn't say we, I am still a mixed bhakta. And I have to acknowledge that these elements are there in me. So they have a place for it. And the place is that they are somehow dovetailed with the desire to also please Krishna. So one's life should have a good mix of dharma, artha, and kama. That relates to yukta ahara viharasya. I didn't analyze it too much because then the focus goes away from Sugriva and Ramachandra and Lakshmana into something very far and mostly heady conversation. So I didn't necessarily dwell in it, but thank you for sharing what you said.
No, thank you. And now it's going too deep. That now you're connecting this verse to dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, which is like completely a different realm now. We're going in a different realm. So if we go in this realm, we'll be lost.
I intentionally did not.
Just put it away. It's more confusing to me now. Thank you.
I was just thinking about the conversation between Lakshmana and Sugriva, and also the conversation between Rama and Sugriva. It's interesting the dynamics of their friendship. When Sugriva met Rama, although Rama was kind of lamenting and also kind of frustrated that Sugriva was not acting upon his promise, there was no awkwardness when they met. Rama nicely embraced him, and before even speaking anything, he just embraced him, and then he spoke. Uh, he welcomed him so nicely, and that broke all barriers, what if there were any.
Yeah, and that's the dhwani in it. The dhwani being the fact that Sugriva came with folded hands and offered his obeisances already indicates to Sri Ramachandra that Sugriva is a very, very dear friend. He's also seeking forgiveness, although they are kings. Remember, when they first met, Sugriva shook hands with Ramachandra, and now he's offering obeisances. So there's a lot that is unspoken. And we all, as students of Ramayana, need to pick up on these very, very subtle indicators. There's no words exchanged, just the actions or behaviors say so much. Second, Sri Ramachandra is not an ordinary human being that holds any grudge. His heart is so soft and beautiful that the slightest indication of repentance in someone or reinstatement completely removes that blemish from Sri Ramachandra's mind completely. That's hard for an ordinary human being to not hold some grudge or some memory of that grudge. And that's the verse that is spoken way back in Balakanda, that Sri Ramachandra is such that if someone shows him one small favor, he remembers that like anything. And if one does hundreds of disfavors, he doesn't remember. He doesn't hold grudge for hundreds of disfavors. Shatamapi is the word, hundreds of also. What a great heart, huh? Are you saying something, Kirti? Because your voice, I can't hear. I can't hear. I know you're there somewhere, and I hear some very faint voice.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Better.
Thank you for elaborating that. There's so much not spoken in the body language. and that is speaking to the exalted culture and the exaltedness of the personalities. And I was also appreciating Lakshmana's interaction with Sugriva. He did not hold back in his feelings when he was approaching Sugriva. When he was walking towards the Kishkinda itself, the earth shook. So it was very evident the feelings he was carrying. I'm sure his body language was also very nicely described. But then soon after, he was quick to take in the situation, gauge the circumstances, and kind of appreciate Sugriva. So
Yeah,
that was very interesting.
he calls him Sakhe, my friend. Lakshmana calls Sugriva Sakhe. Oh, my dear friend. So in friendship, there must be room for not only hey, all sweet talk and Prabhu, you're like that, but there should be room for saying things openly to each other without being so shattered or without being so broken. Also without being intentionally harsh. But sometimes things are said and spoken, and a friendship should have the capacity to hold that also. Otherwise, we have a very awkward idea of friendship that everything is so sweet and smooth, and that's not how it is.
Thank you so much.
If you read Mahabharata, you won't find the interactions between Arjuna and Krishna always gulab jamun like. In fact, a full diet must have all the 6 tastes, all the 6 rasas in it. There's bitter, there's sour, there's pungent, there's sweet, everything is there. But generally we say madhurena samapayet. We should end with sweet things. And that's why I ended today's with the sweetness of Ramachandra's eyes becoming big like the blossoming of a blue or black lotus petal.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? Okay, good. Thank you very, very much for your attending and encouraging me. We look forward to now the Kishkinda Kanda coming to an end. We are in chapter 38 in about 65 chapters, or not 65 more, but there are 65 or 67 chapters. And I hope to accomplish much of it by the time we come to October. Before Karthik, I plan to finish, because there's a lot about the cave in which they go in, and about fasting unto death, which I'm going to sort of cover quickly. And we'll end Kishkinda Kanda with they all arriving at the shore of the big, massive ocean. And then is Sundara Kanda. Fantastic, fantastic section of Ramayana. Okay. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman Ji ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhu. Jai.